reach out to all of you today because I know if you're like me, you're struggling with the insanity that we see happening in the United States right now. And it is heartbreaking to see, but it does not help to ignore the realities. It does not help to ignore the fact that we have our armed forces, our military and ICE putting zip ties on toddlers. You know, it does not help to ignore the fact that they are removing the historic plaques from the Freedmen Cemetery in Dallas, Texas. And you know what, no matter what they take out, whether it's, what they tried to do with Colin Powell, in the Arlington Cemetery, what they tried to do with so many other people in history, removing them from the history books. No matter how much they try and remove that from the history, it does not change history. And the important thing that we have to look at is a balancing act of how do we protect our mental well-being at the same time of making sure that we look at reality. Like I like to say, no one's ever won a chess game by playing it the way we wish the board was. We have to play it the way it is. And the way it is right now is that we have a rise in fascism happening in the United States. There is no easy way to say it other than that. And even if you are traditionally Republican, you have to admit zip ties on toddlers is definitely a step way too far. And we have to admit that when you are trying to erase history, that only reason to erase history is because you want to be able to justify going after a demographic in the near future. So we need to pay attention that they're doing things, as I said, like removing the historical placards in Freedmen's Cemetery about slaves and their existence. And we have to remind ourselves that you can't erase history. It's happened. It has already shaped us. It will continue to shape us. And we deny it and the pain that it left, and we don't do the work of healing, just like in your own life of doing the work of healing when you have PTSD. An actual country can have PTSD. They've actually proven that, the Jews from the Holocaust have inherited PTSD in their DNA. African Americans from slavery have inherited PTSD in their DNA. Native Americans, same thing. But they've also proven that we are very powerful. We can do the work in our lifetime that changes that narrative and that DNA for the future. So how we process what we're seeing right now determines how not just we are, but how the future of our nation will literally be genetically equipped to deal with the barrage of things coming at them. And it's not going to slow down. As we look at history, there is a ratio between innovation and our psychological, sociological ability to process it. And that ratio has pretty much stayed the same in terms of how it's moved. Meaning, basically, 200 years ago, I'm making up a number. Say the ratio was 5 to 10 in terms of our innovation, is 5, our 10 would be where we were in terms of our sociological progress, in terms of our ability to have empathy, in terms of our ability to take responsibility. And those are two incredible important things when it comes to civilization. If we don't have empathy and the ability to see from someone else's eyes, we can't vote with responsibility. And if we don't take responsibility for the whole, then civilization can't work. And that's one of the things I'm really worried about us here in the United States. Meaning, I hear people saying, why should I pay for that? I don't have kids, or that school doesn't serve many people. Well, maybe it doesn't serve many people, but it serves some people. And I'm seeing people getting hoodwinked. And hoodwinked is probably the best way I could state it. Hoodwinked meaning someone is, playing a game with you and stealing something and making you think you want something else. And I'm seeing that happen a lot, actually, to all of us, but especially to white America, especially to young white male Americans, because they're being told, hey, we can give you a future. But when you see young men that are really happy to parade around in their neighborhoods and thinking that they're all being made strong because they're getting to wear a uniform and they're getting to bully people, but in reality, their access to education is being removed, they're actually being hoodwinked because they're losing power. They may be getting a little bit of power now, but it's always going to be a servile role. It's not going to be a role in which they're capable and allowed to think for themselves. Whereas if you have access to education, you can choose to be in a military role, or you can choose to do something else. But you can have the whole wealth of historical knowledge to be able to direct your choices from. So you notice I'm not actually advocating on any perspective right there. I'm saying, how do we empower ourselves to be capable of processing this world? And I have a real concern for all of us in America when there is a true reach to try and deny that history. At the same time, horrible things are happening. And it is horrible to have people marching in the streets. It is horrible to have the insanity that we see up in Chicago. And people need to remember that because it's over there doesn't mean it's not also happening in our backyard. What is permitted in one place is a testing ground for other places. And as a native Texan, I can tell you that is so true. All the insanity that you see out there, they try it out in Texas and they say, if we can get by in Texas, we can get by with the rest of the country. But right now they're trying that out in Chicago, which is something new because they're trying to see, will people up there with more progressive values allow this to happen? And they're also testing the military. They're saying, can we make them look past their ethics? Can we make them forget that these tiny toddlers are human beings that are completely innocent, enough to zip tie them and tie them together and march them out with our machine guns? Can we do that? Can we walk down these streets and take their parents, and because their children are legal citizens, leave them to the point that those children are knocking on the doors of neighbors a week later and needing food, because no one thought about them? Can we do that? Are we capable of making them see them as less than human? And right now I'm being barraged by so many people saying, Miriam, what can I do? What can I do? And I'm also torn between having my heart break and needing to protect my mental sanity and feeling helpless. Well, actually, the answer is really the same thing. The biggest rebellion right now is to recognize our common humanity. The biggest rebellion, the most powerful thing you got, is to have empathy, to declare your passion for compassion for the other person. And what that means is that you take a stand. What that means is that if you see that tiny toddler wondering out, you care about that person. What that means is that you recognize that maybe you don't have children, like Joshua and I don't have children, but I'm happy to pay my taxes because I know that there are struggling communities out there that have no way they could ever afford to be able to go to a private school, or they live in the middle of nowhere and they have no access to any private option. So having vouchers wouldn't do anything for them. But I believe in the United States of America. I care about my nation and the future of the United States because I know what it did for me. Because I know that exceptionalism in the United States, for which the far right is always talking about, can only be made possible if we have the ability to cast the widest net and get the most brilliant, most talented, most people with the most potential and opportunity. So I want to share something with you. I recently just had dinner with a really good friend of ours named Baroness Susan Greenfield. She's here in the UK. She's awesome. She's actually created a pill that prevents Alzheimer's. So when you're diagnosed with pre-Alzheimer's, like my poor mother had, you start taking this pill and you never develop Alzheimer's. Incredible. But in the process, she knew she needed to have some of the most talented people around her. So she actually created a test, and she has a passion for young women. So when she went into third world countries, she would give this test to people who were living in dirt huts and whatnot. And don't ask me how she did it. She's one of those brilliant neurosurgeons, neuroscientists around. So she knew what she wanted to put in this test. And it had to be a test that wasn't based on whatever memorization, regurgitation you're around. It had to deal with your aptitude, your actual IQ. And she was able to identify young girls that had the potential to become brilliant neuroscientists. Since then, when she finds one, whether it's in Africa, India, Latin America, whatever, they're always, I'm talking real third world circumstances, children that would never have a good life otherwise. She gives them this test, they pass, she champions them, she's paid for them to go to college, and now she has a remarkable team of these young women who are all obviously geniuses, and they have helped her to develop an Alzheimer's prevention drug. Now, think about that. This drug could end Alzheimer's and dementia for our entire species. And it is possible, it has been made possible because of geniuses that would have never been identified without that test, who are living in dirt huts. Now, when people talk about exceptionalism and intelligence and potential, they forget that IQ is not about what education you've had access to. IQ is basically what you've been genetically given. Right now in Mexico, you have a little 6-year-old girl that's been tested with a higher IQ than Albert Einstein. She's considered one of the most brilliant people in the world. She came from poverty. We in the United States are going to have a major brain drain, because if you are basically making sure that only a certain set of people have access, and from everything I'm hearing Hegseth say, they want white, they want straight, they want male. So what is going to happen? We would not be the nation that would get to benefit from discovering those brilliant minds. With my husband Joshua, his grandparents, his grandparents were the children of immigrants, and his grandfather ended up being one of the founders of rocket science. And somehow our nation was able to find him. Those stories are amazing. A man got on the moon because the child of immigrants helped make that happen. So when we start looking at all this stuff and what's happening in our nation, when you see a child being taken out of their house and have zip ties put on them and marched out with machine guns, maybe you don't care about that child. Maybe you only care about yourself. So if you only care about yourself and what makes America great, well then think about this. Think about what Baroness Susan Greenfield has found. We could lose an incredible wealth of brilliant minds that we have in our backyard. Add to that, when we are now preventing people from coming over to the United States to pursue their education, we have Harvard, we have Stanford, we have Cambridge, we have Johns Hopkins. A lot of these immigrants that would pursue their degrees would fall in love with our country and become citizens. And in that way, part of American exceptionalism was we attracted these brilliant minds and high IQs from around the world, and they added to the wealth of innovation. So when we're starting to look at all this, and what we're hearing from the White House and from MAGA, and we see what's happening to immigrants in our country, we are actually making ourselves weaker by these kinds of policies. And, as I tell people all the time, I've been blessed to be in a position to make an impact. But if I can make an impact because I was given opportunity, then so can every other young brown child out there that is being put in handcuffs or zip ties. They have that potential. And I'll tell you something else as an immigrant into the United States is the appreciation that I have for this country. I would not be speaking clearly with you if I hadn't had access to the education that taught me to speak and know the difference between crown and crayon. That took special education. And to hear that they are removing the things that help people who are deaf, the people that are blind, and they're removing that from curriculum because they think that's DEI, that's cruelty. That's not something extra that they're giving to people. That's actually helping people to be lifted. And that's something between equity and equality that people aren't talking about. There's a beautiful image I've seen go around. It shows a fence, and there are 3 people trying to look over the fence. And there's one tiny person, and they only come up to a third of the fence. There's no way they can see over the fence. There's somebody else that barely gets their nose over the fence, and there's a really tall person looking over the fence. And it says equality, and they're all standing on the exact same box. And the tiny person still will never be able to see over the fence. So then they show it later. And they show basically a tiny person has 2 blocks. The person who only had their nose over has 1 block. The tall person doesn't need a block. And they're all being able to see over the fence. Now, some people would say that idea is socialism, communism. I'm actually arguing that that is opportunity. And my vision personally for the United States of America is that we have equality of opportunity to contribute to making America great. That should not be seen as anti-democratic. That should be seen as, hey, we want to get the best out of our nation. And that means that you're not looking at skin color, you're not looking at sexual orientation, you're not looking at religion, you are looking at who has the ability to contribute. And by golly, maybe I don't want to socialize with you. Maybe I don't like you, but I want to benefit from your presence. So as I tell people that are, I've talked to imams now, rabbis, priests, whatever. I've talked to trans, leaders. I've talked, LGBT. I've talked to, chiefs of different Native American nations. And I know that while I'm blessed to have friends with all those demographics, that a lot of them would never necessarily hang out with each other. But if you are not white, straight, MAGA's version of Christianity, guess what? You're on the same team right now. That means that the most conservative imam with dark skin is on the same team as the biggest flaming drag queen. Because what we want is an America where we can walk down the grocery aisle and calmly buy our head of broccoli, our alfalfa, our cheese, our milk, and not have to talk to each other and get along and know that we're going to be peaceful. And that's fine. And we all pay our taxes to keep the streets clean and, have clean water and safety. I mean, that's what we want. And that means that we can get along enough to share in a beautiful vision that is freedom. And it does not mean we have to be hunky-dory. Although, yeah, as a flaming progressive, of course, I would love to see that. But the reason why I'm sharing all this with you is that it's important that as you get this barrage of craziness that's coming at you from all directions, and you feel depressed, and it makes you feel it. I mean, I know I've like many of you, I don't sleep well, I get stressed, I've had migraines, I've had hives, I've gotten all the stress that a lot of you have been talking to me about having. And people have told me that my Facebook page can be triggering because I share this information. And I try and say, there are good people in the world and push a lot of positive stories out there. And I know a lot of you just want the glamour, and I'm happy to do that for you. But the reason why I balance it is that we can't go through like an ostrich and pretend this stuff isn't happening. We have to look at the reality. Because if we don't look at the reality, something deeply held and precious, which is the true exceptionalism of America, and that's the freedom our founding fathers gave us. Our founding fathers entrusted us with a responsibility, not to inherit something that's unchangeable, but to inherit something that's fragile. And for those of you that haven't seen it, I know I keep talking about it, but please go see the movie Amsterdam if you haven't, because I wish this had been taught in my history class, that we came so close to losing our democracy in the 1930s prior to World War II. There was an American Nazi Party. Their slogan was "Make America Great, America First." That was part of that history. And what happened then is there was a general, he stood on stage, they tried to make him, because he was a war hero from World War I, they tried to make him president. And then when he found out what they were trying to do and turn America into a fascist state, he got on live radio and it's broadcast across the nation. And he said, "Don't vote for me. They're trying to overturn democracy." And they tried to assassinate him in that moment. He survived. But that's how close. It took a general who cared so deeply about freedom in the United States, so deeply about it, that he put all of our freedoms, your freedom and my freedom, ahead of his ego. That is true exceptionalism. And we have to remember, a true leader, a true alpha, and I can say this because I've been around a lot of alphas. I've been around princes, I've been around CEOs, and I've been around Native American chiefs. A true alpha remembers they are a servant of the people. A pseudo alpha makes the people serve them. Do not trust a leader, any leader, that believes that the people are there to serve them. If someone's at the top of the pyramid, my father used to say, it's because everybody underneath is holding them up. You are important, whoever you are. I don't care what function. I don't care if you're listening to this and you're a CEO, you're listening to this and you're a janitor, you're listening to this and and you're some royalty, you're listening to this, and you're a school teacher, you're a retiree. I don't care, what you are. You are equally important to this equation of everybody else, and your value as a human being is absolutely critical and important, and making humanity great, making humanity what it can be. Because the true challenge of us as human beings is recognizing that common humanity, recognizing the value in each other, because we will not survive this 21st century if we don't approach it with depth of compassion for the other. Michio Kaku is an amazing astrophysicist, and I love listening to what he says. And there's something that I'll put a link down here so that those of you want to hear. But Michio Kaku talks about levels of societies and how they evolve over time. And he talks about, you see Independence Day, or, you see all these big alien movies. And he said for an alien race to come over to America, they would have had to survive their own technology. Think about that. They would have to survive their sociological context, or what I like to call the software. The sociology is the software. The technology is the hardware. He says that if the sociology isn't there, where people have learned to live peacefully with mutual respect, we will not survive our technology. Because again, going back to what I was saying earlier, the rate at which technology is evolving is moving so fast. So remember when I was talking about earlier, 5 to 10, that ratio? So like in the 1800s, I'm making up numbers here, but as an example, say it was 5 to 10. 10 was basically where we were, sociologically. 5 was the technology. You move into 1900s, it's more like 10-10. Now you're moving here, and it's like the technology is like a 20, and we are stuck at 10. And every day, not year, it's moving faster and faster. And so next year, it could be 30-10, 40-10. We have to move faster with our sociological capacity as human beings to work together, to live together, to be mutually collaborative, and to recognize that people who seem to have nothing in common with us are of equal value to ourselves. Because if we don't do that, we will not survive this new age. And yet, the potential that we have as human beings, that's exciting. And those of you that are telling me, how do I combat this depression that I'm feeling in my bones from all this rise in fascism and craziness? Think about the potential we have. Right now, you have scientists that have discovered how to make bones heal up without having to be in casts. You have teeth that are healing up without cavities. You have people that have discovered how to, help the body recognize cancer without having to go and do surgery. You have, I mentioned Susan, people that can end Alzheimer's. You have so many incredible technology. That's just the medical side. The things we could do as humanity, if we could get past all this nutty stuff, is unlimited. We could end world hunger. There's no reason for a single human being to live homeless. We could work together and bring in an era that we can't even begin to imagine. And one day, 100 years from now, people are going to look at us and we will be their ancestors. They're going to say, wow, what a world they helped bring in. Or they're going to say, they're the reason we're living in hell. But all of us are that powerful by our decisions. And that's what I want to emphasize to you. When you start feeling depressed, remember, the reason why you're feeling depressed about all this is that you have compassion. Don't lose it. Don't become numb, because that is the greatest rebellion of all. And that is your strength that helps us to change this world and will help us defend democracy. The more you recognize our common humanity, the more you recognize that having an internal desire for peace and compassion is the greatest strength of all and will always be more powerful than those that want to exert fear. Yes, people can be hurt by those that want to exert fear, but fear will never defeat love. It won't. Love engenders a type of loyalty that is beyond anything. And it should not be confused with people in a cult-like mentality. A cult-like mentality gives their power away, says, leave me so I don't have to think. Love says, I recognize the value in you because you recognize the value in me. And together we can collaborate to do something, whatever that thing is. And right now, that's something between you and me and everybody else in the United States and the world is to help bring in a new age. I would actually say that is our most sacred responsibility. So I just want to leave those thoughts with you today. Thank you for all that all of you do in this world. And I challenge you to stand up for democracy by remembering that the most sacred responsibility we all have is within ourselves, because our founding fathers said that, quoting again Thomas Jefferson, he said that he hoped that one day his descendants would consider them antiquated because they had been able to evolve and move on and make choices. He knew he was a slaveholder. He knew they made the wrong decisions. He wanted us to go past it. We're in that challenge now. Will we go past this seductive invitation into fascism? Or will we take responsibility of the reins for democracy and yield in a brave new era? Thank you.
Is you on our side or is you faking? Is you trying to